The top issue for voters is the economy. He lied about that. The next issue is probably education. Lied about that. The next issue is probably public safety. Lied about that. And a hot button issue that a lot of parents are talking about, transgender ideology overtaking our institutions, lying about that.
Attention passengers, we ask that you please fasten your seatbelts at this time and secure all baggage underneath your seat or in the overhead compartments. Flyover Country with Scott Jennings is prepared for takeoff.
We have legal troubles for Trump and Biden. We have some very compelling testimony on Capitol Hill. And one of the big events of the gubernatorial race, a big forum in Louisville this week in Flyover Country. I'm Joe Arnold, your roundtable host. Sean Southard is here, Kevin Grout, Jared Crawford, and Scott Jennings, just off the set at CNN, joining us from New York City. Hey, Scott.
Good evening. I have to tell you guys that we were just sort of going over the rundown of the show, and you know what we didn't even put in it?
Uh-oh.
The UFOs. There was.
I actually watched an hour of that during a baseball game. I had it on in the background. It was fascinating. Did you watch that at all?
I mean, we now have sworn testimony from somebody who claims to know that we have aliens.
From somebody who claims to know.
Well, here's what I don't understand about this. You have whistleblowers blowing the whistle on aliens, and the media thinks that's great. And then you have whistleblowers blowing the whistle on Joe and Hunter Biden. And they're like, well, so-called whistleblowers, you know. And so I guess it depends on what you're blowing the whistle on, how seriously they take you. But the aliens was a kind of a fascinating thing, among other things that happened in Washington this week.
I guess the aliens must be Republicans then.
Since I was watching this, I actually watched this, Scott. The best part about the hearing on the UFOs, or they called them something else, UAEs, or is that United Arab Emirates? You know, whatever it was.
Why are they changing the name of UFO?
I don't know.
Well, it's insensitive.
They changed the words of everything.
They hired a good PR firm.
That's right.
Well,
it was triggering.
Like, well, did you find something in the crash? Yes. And was it a biologic?
Yeah.
Was it human or non-human? It's like not human. I'm like, what if he identified as human? We don't even know.
These are our future overlords. Let's not offend them.
So we won't.
I mean, he might have identified as a human being, and now we've taken away his identity. Come on now.
We won't play the coverage of this, but I will just tell you, if you listen back to it on YouTube, the best part about it was one of the, I don't know if it was a ranking member of the chair, kept getting it confused with the incident they were talking about was the Tic Tac incident. Apparently, this foreign object that was moving around below the F-15 resembled a Tic Tac, a little breath mint Tic Tac. That's what it was shaped like, the cylinder. He kept calling it Tic Toc. The Tic Toc. So it was a whole other thing going on. Listen for that there. But thank you, Scott,
If you've seen the video, by the way, of that incident, it is crazy. Like this object is moving, and the Air Force pilots who saw it and recorded it were going nuts because obviously they didn't know what was going on.
They said this object went from basically the right above the water in the ocean to 80,000. In other words, like into space is where it was going from in no time at all.
I think climate change caused it to go that fast and rise that rapidly. Honestly, climate.
That would be good. So, Scott, just off the set at CNN in New York, and reacting to the news of a added indictment. This is not basically the January 6th. This is back to the Mar-a-Lago and the documents case, right? And,
that's right.
But really, I'd like for you to sort of recap some of your arguments here because I thought they were so good. This is not good for of course, any Republican or for Donald Trump. But at the same time, there are people who are still going to be trying to, stick by him and somehow defend what is continuing to be a worse and worse scenario as far as how this is looking for his legal case.
Yeah, well, let's first of all go over the news. I mean, this just happened a couple of hours ago. The new charges include 2 counts of obstructing justice. And it's all part of the prosecutor's allegations that Donald Trump last summer tried to delete essentially or wipe a server containing security footage at his home, Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach. And they also charged him with one count of willfully retaining a top secret document. And this was based on the audio tape, which we've all heard, where he's waving around a paper. And there's been conjecture, and I think maybe even Trump at one point tried to say it was newspaper clippings, but basically now they have the document, and it's about a possible attack on Iran that was described as highly confidential and secret. So they've got the Iran document, which he showed to these biographers, which we've heard an audio tape of that, and then some additional obstruction of justice. I listened to some of our legal analysts tonight, including Ty Cobb, who was former Trump White House counsel for a bit, and he just said, I think his quote was something like, the first set, indictment that came out on the documents was, an indictment that'll last 1,000 years. And this just makes it an indictment that'll last into antiquity. He was pretty mortified at just what a strong case they had against Trump. So I came on Erin Burnett tonight, and she was kind of analyzing this to give some perspective. I think the average Republican, right or wrong, but most Republicans are going to analyze the news of the week and say, so the Department of Justice this week did two things. They tried on one day to give Hunter Biden, the president's son, and Donald Trump's chief opponent, blanket immunity for all future criminal activity that he may be involved in. And then the next day they came in and went ahead and piled on top of Donald Trump. Now, I'm not saying that is a correct point of view, although it is a point of view, and certainly Trump, the evidence is to be believed, deserves some of this. But that was my sort of analysis, was that a lot of Republicans are going to see it that way. It's the same Department of Justice dealing with Biden's one way and Trump's another. Separate cases, separate issues. I get all that, but just, most people aren't lawyers, and they're not going to sift through it like that. So that was, and then we talked a little bit about the political ramifications of it and so on. But I don't suspect Republicans are going to react to this any differently than they reacted to it a few weeks ago when the first set of indictments came out, which is to basically argue that Joe Biden's trying to put his opponent in jail, and they're going to stop at nothing to do it.
I guess maybe the similarities as well is that this drip, though. I mean, with the Joe Biden case and with Hunter Biden, it was for a long time, Joe Biden swore up and down he never talked business with Hunter, and now he's changing it to somehow say, was it Kevin? That
he never has talked about business. No, it used to be he never talked about business. Now he was never in business with him.
So it's a kind of a shifting line there. But
right.
The longer this is going on, and I think we talked about this once before, Scott, but are you sensing, obviously you deal with the national media every day, and you're part of the national media. Are you sensing the worm has turned at all? That people are a little bit more critical and looking at this Hunter Biden situation with Joe Biden as to say, well, maybe Joe Biden has maybe went afoul here after all.
Well, I think honestly, the whistleblower testimony from a couple of weeks ago really was powerful. And even though like the Washington Post and New York Times have kind of ignored it, I have to compliment CNN. They've had the whistleblowers on the air. In fact, this morning I was on the morning show, and right after me, they had one of the whistleblowers on. You just can't ignore what they said. It really calls into question whether Hunter Biden is getting away with, proverbial murder here when it comes to all the things he was engaged in. So then you go to this court hearing this week on him, and basically the Department of Justice and his defense lawyers were colluding to try to put one over on the judge and give Hunter Biden immunity and perpetuity for anything else, including the foreign lobbying stuff that he's under investigation for. And that's where the rubber hits the road. Hunter Biden going overseas, getting state-owned foreign entities to send millions of dollars to the Biden family. He didn't pay taxes on it. He also didn't register as a foreign agent. Well, he's still apparently under investigation for all this, and they were trying to wipe it away. So, yeah, I do think the worm has turned a little bit on it. And I just don't think you can ignore these whistleblowers. And we have to credit Congressman Jamie Comer, friend of the pod of Kentucky, for helping draw this out. I mean, look, the Bidens own nothing. They make nothing. They're not experts on anything. The only thing they're selling is Joe Biden. He's the product. The vice president and now the president is the product. It's influence peddling at best, and it is highly illegal foreign, influence enrichment operations at worst. And we need to find out which.
And I think we're going to get that information because, like you said, Scott, the House Republicans are doing a great job. Both Jamie Comer, Jim Jordan over at the Judiciary Committee. I mean, they're not only doing these big explosive hearings, they're out in the media talking about it, explaining it to the American people, making it understandable for us. And yeah, they're talking about real tangible payments that went to the Biden family. And I think I heard today some while he was vice president from overseas. So, good on them for staying on top of this. Good on this judge who, this knew that this deal didn't pass the sniff test, and she sent them all back and said, try again. You can't. I think she was questioning even the constitutionality of what they were trying to do on his gun charge, right?
Oh yeah, the judge I think was the hero of the week for not just rubber stamping this. She said at one point, I feel like I'm being asked to rubber stamp something here, and there was like even information they were trying to sneak in that she hadn't even seen. It was a real shady deal. So good job on that judge.
Didn't Hunter's lawyers call the courthouse pretending to be somebody else and then lie about it?
I was going to ask about that. Yes, they were misrepresenting themselves. It's crazy what they can get away with.
Oh my gosh. So when you sort of round it back to Trump and everything that happened today, you're going to have a continued political environment where Republicans look at the Department of Justice through, a very, very jaundiced eye. And honestly, for good reason.
Yeah.
Well, on both sides here, though, the problem is with both these situations, it's pretty clear they have them dead to rights in both cases. This is the whole situation. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it smells like a duck, it's a duck. And this is, both of these presidents committed crimes. Joe Biden shouldn't be president. Donald Trump shouldn't be president. And let's just get over it.
What's interesting is the timing of all this. The documents case had already set a trial date for May of 2024. There was some conjecture tonight about whether these new indictments will impact that. The whole reason, by the way, I'm in New York is because everybody was expecting Trump to be indicted on January 6th stuff this week, and that didn't happen. This news really shocked everybody. But I was talking to one of our legal analysts because I was saying, well, does this mean the January 6th stuff would come up after the documents? He said, not necessarily, because the documents case is more complex. You have to have, because some of the documents are classified and you got to go through these hearings and clearances. He actually thought if Trump gets indicted, even though it's the second indictment, federal indictment on the January 6th stuff, it could even go first. He said, look, this case could be tried in 5 months. It's open and shut, cut and dry. You won't have the same complications. And so if you're Trump, and he's right, you could be looking at a scenario where you've got 2 federal trials essentially within the first 6 months of 2024. The New York trial, remember that dog is still that's scheduled for 2024. And then the Georgia stuff, I read today they were putting up barricades at the courthouse in Atlanta.
Right.
Obviously they're fixing to do something down there. So if you're Trump, you really are looking at a scenario where a whole big chunk of your time is going to be taken up with trials, preparing for trials, and seeing how they unfold. It would be quite unsettling if I were in his shoes.
I sometimes look at these situations and wonder about a quarter of a century from now or 50 years from now, or historians looking back at all of this. It's so clear what both of these men have done and their respective families or others or associates have done. It's very clear. The other thing, if I could, and the other thing going on in D.C. today, dramatic in my opinion, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Constitution and Limited Government. It was a hearing on, quote-unquote, gender-affirming care for children. This is another example of an absolute crime being perpetrated on children. And the medical, some parts of the medical community who are all too eager to perform sex change operations and or puberty blocking and lifetime consequences for these children who express some confusion about their developmental years. In this case, there is a woman named Chloe Cole, 19 years old. Actually, turned 19 years old on Thursday. She testified on her 19th birthday, who at the age of 12 placed a letter on the dining room table for her parents to read, coming out as transgender, basically to her parents at that point. She now tells this is a mistake. She was a confused 12-year-old, but unfortunately, her parents went to a very receptive and activist doctor who said, "Do you want to have a a dead daughter and a live son kind of thing, and kind of threatened them into saying you needed, and immediately put this girl on puberty-blocking drugs, as well as later on performing a mastectomy on this child. Now she's 19 years old, realizes I'm a woman. This was this confusion I was going through. My life has been ruined. But incredibly gracious and emotional testimony at this Judiciary Subcommittee today.
I didn't need to be lied to. I needed compassion. I needed to be loved. I needed to be given therapy to help me work through my issues, not affirm to my delusion that by transforming into a boy, it would solve all my problems. We need to stop telling 12-year-olds that they were born wrong, that they are right to reject their own bodies and feel uncomfortable with their own skin. We need to stop telling children that puberty is an option, that they can choose what kind of puberty they will go through, just so they can choose what clothes to wear or what music to listen to. Puberty is a rite of passage to adulthood, not a disease to be mitigated. Today, I should be at home with my family celebrating my 19th birthday, and instead I'm making a desperate plea to my elected representatives. Learn the lessons from other medical scandals like the opioid crisis, to recognize that doctors are human too, and sometimes they are wrong.
I was so moved by this woman's testimony, and it is a cry for help. It is also a shock to the senses, and it's sort of like this. It is this clarion moment as to say, stop the madness.
How old did you say she was when all this started?
12
years old. You know, when I hear politicians, by the way, we're having debates about this stuff. A lot of these Democrats, Andy Beshear falls back on it. Well, we really just need to let the parents make all the decisions here. This is all. Sometimes parents do things to their children they ought not do.
Especially if they're relying on the advice of medical professionals, like, many parents would do, who are pushing an agenda.
That's right. And it's sad.
Yeah, it was a terrible story. Chip Roy, I think, of Texas, brought the witness to the table today. So it was good that this was exposed. Thanks for playing it.
It is. If you watch more of the hearing, you can look it up, obviously, on YouTube and other places like that. It's, this whole concept of quote unquote, it still just drives me up a wall and it makes my skin crawl for this whole phrase of gender affirming care to be used in the first place. It is what is the word I'm looking for, Sean, from propaganda terms, in terms of being able to
doublespeak.
Yeah, it's exactly the opposite. It's Orwellian. Of what it actually is.
Well, the left.
Why did you look at Sean when you were looking for help and and coming up with like unethical
when you
propaganda?
Think propaganda,
He did really say, help me out here, Sean. What's another word for propaganda? Since you dabble in it every day. But no, you're a very literate. And you can remember these words immediately. So anyway, go ahead. I should lean back like William F. Buckley again.
You should.
No, but it's really interesting how the left co-ops language. I mean, who could be against something like, quote, gender-affirming care?
Right.
It sounds like a nice thing. Who wouldn't want to be, quote, pro-choice? But this is what the left does, is they take these terms and they take them and they use them in a way that conservatives, and Jared's raising his hand now.
Yes,
to
Jared.
say something.
Well, they did this with CRT too, right? And you're going to watch the same exact progression. First, it was, it's actually not taught in schools. It's not even that good. And then it was like, here's the evidence that it's happening. And then all of a sudden it's like, actually, it's good that that's happening. You're sort of seeing the same thing. Well, that doesn't even really happen. You're just making up the boogeyman. They did this with sports as well. Well, that doesn't even happen. And then it happened. It was like, there's actually. It doesn't even matter. Why do you even care about it? And this is kind of this like Mott and Bailey that goes on, this kind of like side speak. And you're seeing the beginning of this, where first it's, that doesn't happen. And then we figure out it happens. It's not that bad. And then actually it needs to happen. Then all of a sudden it's healthcare. And if you deny it, you're denying health, right? It's this like progression that happens with all of these issues.
The other thing about this hearing you brought up was the knots they'll tie themselves into trying to come up with ways to justify this insanity. So there was Congressman
Steve Cohen
of Tennessee. So they're discussing whether biological males should be able to go in a girl's locker room and change clothes with the girls. Let's hear what Cohen had to say.
I think Penn didn't deal with your situation like they could have and should have, in putting up some type of different barriers in the women's area of the locker room. But that's another issue.
So basically, he invented separate locker rooms for men and women. But I mean, it was so stupid because basically you had people saying, I'm a girl, and they put boys in here and made us change clothes in front of the boys. And he's like, well, maybe we should put up barriers. Maybe we should have separate areas for the boys and the.
I'm just pontificating here off the top of my head.
I'm just-
Let me come up with some good
Just
ideas.
spitballing
Yeah.
here. Just spitballing. Not sure.
But of course, he's a Democrat and he's sympathetic to this transgender ideology. And basically, though, what he's admitting is that there is separate biology. Biology does matter. And I don't think he realized how stupid, but sort of revealing
and that
he
people
was.
all inherently have a right to feel comfortable in these spaces. And that they shouldn't, on a political whim, all be forced together into an uncomfortable or an unsafe space.
Speaking of denying reality and twisting yourself into knots, this issue's come to the fore in Kentucky recently.
Well, Senate Bill 150, thankfully, has actually taken a great stand and protected children because, according to this bill, which was approved by the General Assembly,
Yes.
overwhelmingly,
And was it just approved, Joe?
it was approved.
But how did it get approved?
Well, and to be clear, by overwhelming votes. Well, I remember now.
What
because
happened? What happened?
What happened,
There
Joe?
was something
What was the
you're leaving out
process?
of
Because the
that.
General Assembly introduces bills,
And
they
then it
pass
goes
it,
somewhere
But to be clear,
else.
it does ban
surgeries,
surgeries to
puberty
change,
blockers,
puberty blockers, all those kind of things. But basically,
amongst a lot of other things.
Right,
We should
other
just
thing-
be
right.
candid about that.
Right, but I'm saying that's a big part of it, and the fact that what Chloe Cole was testifying to so passionately and articulately on Capitol Hill on Thursday is exactly what the vast majority of the General Assembly approved a bill to ban just those practices that are barbaric to children. So it passed overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
and after it was approved, after that it was vetoed by the governor.
No.
It was.
No.
Yes, it was.
I don't believe
And
you.
then it was, but then the veto because
I
of the
have
way the
seen
Constitution-
seen an ad here recently on my TV
Yes.
where
Andy
the
Beshear
governor
on
of the
yes.
Commonwealth of Kentucky looks straight to the camera and talks about how he's a Christian and how it's his faith teaches him that every child is a child of God, which everyone I think agrees with, and then touts a position that's totally against what he did in March when he vetoed that bill.
Now he must have said that in March, right, Sean?
I don't know. I haven't. It's not like I keep track of the guy.
Hey, what did he say in March, Sean? Enlighten us.
He vetoed the bill that we were just talking about, and he said.
So you're saying that he literally signed a piece of paper that stopped a ban on transgender mutilation and surgeries?
That's true. I'm sorry to tell you that the governor is a liar.
What?
But I heard from the reporters that he's been against it all along. Is that true, Sean?
I don't think so, because I think as far back as 2022, he was promoting surgeries in his veto messages for children.
Yeah.
2022? That was last year.
Yeah.
Wow.
When he vetoed Senate Bill 83, which is the bill that banned boys from playing girls' sports, he said, we don't need this bill. You want to know why we don't need this bill? Because we have state guidance that eliminates all potential athletic advantages that a boy would have in playing a girl's sport. This is in his veto message. He cites it. And in it, he cites the fact that there are state rules. At the time, of course, this has now been repealed because of the General Assembly's strong leadership, that says that if you're a boy and you want to compete in a girl's sport and you have gone through puberty, you must have surgery as a minor.
Really?
It's in his veto. He cites it, chapter and verse, himself. Mm-hmm. It's all in there in the public domain.
Are you telling me that the governor of Kentucky is looking into television cameras and lying about things?
Well, Scott, that's an interesting question. I hate to tell you yes, but it's true because that's the thing that he's done the whole entire time he's been in office.
You know what's amazing, Sean, is this isn't even the only thing you lied about this week.
No, it's not.
What else happened? Do tell.
They underreported homicides in the state.
So you're telling me the other day when he had a press conference claiming all this reduction in crime that they lied about it?
And was it just by like 1 or 2?
No, I mean they rolled out saying we have had a 33% reduction in homicides, and they left out Jared, more than half the homicides in Louisville.
But look, first of all, the press conference touting these numbers was ridiculous. Louisville, they undercounted 100 homicides in Louisville. If we go back a decade, there wasn't even a total of 100 homicides in Louisville.
So there was that, and then Louisville Metro Police is like, I don't know, we reported the right numbers to the state, and then all the stories came out, and then eventually KSP was like, oh, we don't know really what happened. It says that we didn't get the right numbers from LMPD, and then
Sean, this all sounds so vaguely familiar.
I know. You want to go back to like a month ago where he was like talking about job numbers, about how many Kentuckians were working,
and he said that some number, and then it turned out he lied about that too. Refresh my memory.
Yeah, he trotted out a number saying that there is a historic number, more Kentuckians than ever before in the state's history were working.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had to come back and say, well, jobs filled, which means that there are more people working additional jobs in order to make ends meet.
And that at the time seemed vaguely familiar to something else that happened. It has something to do with teachers.
Yes.
Remind me. Refresh me.
This guy ran around the state saying we need to fill the teacher vacancies. There are like all these thousands of teacher vacancies in the state. I can't remember the exact number, but he got it wrong by a significant number and had to be fact checked by like, listen,
he was saying
guys,
there were 11,000 teacher vacancies.
It's like 1,600 or something like that.
And the number is like a small percentage of that.
So let's just think about
that's where the one went from the crime numbers. They just dragged it over.
The top issue for voters is the economy.
Mm-hmm.
He lied about that. The next issue is probably education. Lied about that. The next issue is probably public safety. Lied about that. And a hot button issue that a lot of parents are talking about, transgender ideology overtaking our institutions, lying about that. Is this the most dishonest campaign for governor or any other office we have seen in recent memory? I mean, I'm having trouble counting up. I'm not having any trouble remembering dishonest moments. I'm having a hard time coming up with any honest moments.
Does he think we're stupid?
Yes. No, that's exactly what he thinks. He thinks he can say whatever he wants and get away with it. He thinks he can do anything he wants in Frankfurt and just pretend it never happened, and that basically no one will ever notice or care or make a point of it. That yes, and honestly, for the last 3.5 years, that's basically how he's been allowed to operate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're in a campaign, and you would hope the voters would take a closer look at this stuff.
I think things could be worse, though. I mean, foster kids could be sleeping on the floor and
in state buildings, like office buildings without any running water.
That's Andy Beshear's. They're
taken to the YMCA every 3 to 4 days to shower.
Yeah.
Scott, let me ask you as a campaign tactical matter. I was curious, and that there actually is. I didn't realize this, and I was out of town and missed some of the campaign ads coming out. But the Beshear campaign actually has an ad where he is taking on this the transgender issue.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, just from your experience in running or consulting on campaigns, does this suggest to you that this issue is having an effect on his support, and he believes that he needs to say something now about this?
Yes, it suggests to me that he knows he is very vulnerable on the issue of radical gender ideology, and is trying to inoculate himself by lying. And you don't put an ad up like that straight to camera if you aren't petrified about what would happen if everybody came to realize your record and the truth. So yeah, I think he knows it, and they're trying to wish it away, trying to wish it into the cornfield, like the old Twilight Zone episode. But I just don't think he's going to get away with it. There are other ads on the air from the RGA and one other outside group that are kind of going through a laundry list of what he's doing. This is part of it. But I think what they did was telegraph how fearful they are that people find out the truth here, which I think could entice outsiders to, or camera, it could entice people to continue to focus in on it, because he's obviously very fearful, and he should be fearful of it. It's a visceral issue for people.
Here's the other question I have tactically. So if he now comes out in opposing his earlier position, which I would think would have won him the support of the more liberal extremes of his party, would he somehow jeopardize the kind of how fervent the support is from those folks? Or are they so against Daniel Cameron that they're going to vote for Andy Beshear no matter what, and he can pretty much just abuse that relationship politically because they're already in the bank? Or how does that work?
Great question. I was kind of wondering if some of the teachers that organized all the protests of Senate Bill 150 are going to whip up a group and go over to the mansion.
Yeah, they know how to get kids on school buses and take them to Frankfurt.
I mean, it sounds like Andy Beshear wants to reverse his position on this. Maybe he needs some protesting. I don't know. We'll see. Great question. I mean, if they were so excited to take people into the Capitol to scream at the legislature, Andy Beshear is now repudiating his own position on it, acting like it never happened. You could make a case and people ought to be mad about it.
Speaking of education and actually, before we get there, I do want to point out that, and I mentioned it before, that we are this is the heat now of the campaign for governor. We have several events happening over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks that pretty much define for those folks outside Kentucky listening to Flyover Country, thank you. So we have several very unique institutions in Kentucky. First of all, this week, the Kentucky Farm Bureau every year hosts its candidate forum, inviting the candidates for governor and sometimes for U.S. Senate to come in. The board of the Farm Bureau takes the opportunity to be able to state sort of the policy positions of the Farm Bureau itself, and then gives each of the candidates an opportunity to see whether or not they register with those issues. Of course, coming up in about a week and a half, the next big event on the calendar will be Fancy Farm in Graves County at St. Jerome Catholic Church, where you're going to have the candidates appearing there. And then after that, the Kentucky State Fair and the ham breakfast, the Farm Bureau again.
And our state fair is the best state fair.
You'd better believe it. Absolutely.
It's the best state fair in the state.
So those are the three big moments here, kind of defining the rollout of the juice, the campaign. So I guess, was it Wednesday was the Farm Bureau's?
Yeah.
So, tell me about what happened at the Farm Bureau's big candidate forum, Sean.
Well, it really wasn't a candidate forum because there was only one candidate that showed up. Governor Beshear did not show up.
They call it Meet the Candidates, but I guess they can drop the plural.
Yeah, they can drop the S.
Meet the candidates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so he was not there.
Yeah, he did not show up. Didn't give a reason why that he couldn't be there. I guess he was, shooting this new ad he was doing. And so he didn't show up, and he did show up in 2019. And so Daniel Cameron showed up, talked directly to Kentucky Farm Bureau and the 75,000 farm families across our state, and talked about the state budget, his priorities as it related to agriculture, but also a couple other things as it related to education and law enforcement, and even came out in support of Jason Aldean's song.
Yeah, he did.
Said he liked that song, and so it was a good event, and everyone should go watch it at the Kentucky Farm Bureau. I think we have a clip of it that Kevin's going to play.
This is an important event, by the way, because the Farm Bureau has people in every county. They represent hundreds of thousands of Kentuckians via the Federation and via the insurance company. It's one of the most influential groups because of their reach and the just the number of communities they're involved in. And so, first of all, they should be commended for doing a Meet the Candidates forum because you just don't get that many chances in a campaign to hear directly in unaltered and unedited ways substantive policy questions, which you get asked at this thing. But let's hear from Daniel Cameron.
Show up today, and you all obviously know that. Of course, he will show up at the ham breakfast here in a few weeks, and he'll lecture you on your values and tell you what his values are and try to bully you into thinking that your position and values should be different. But I hope that you recognize that is not the way in which I operate, and I stand firmly with your values. I respect your values. You'll never have to worry about Daniel Cameron as governor coming to your ham breakfast or any other event.
Is he saying that Andy Beshear is not coming to the ham breakfast either?
No, he said he would come to the ham breakfast.
But he's going to lecture you.
them because he doesn't want to take their questions.
I mean, do y'all remember like a few years ago at the ham breakfast when Beshear refused to show up and he sent this like 20-minute video?
Oh, was that the year that he didn't go because of COVID? And then he didn't go to Fancy Farm because he wanted to go to Israel, but then canceled that and just stayed home that day. This guy has a lot on his calendar, I think.
So the Farm Bureau, 2 big events. You have the Meet the Candidate Forum.
Yeah.
You have the ham breakfast. So that'll really be an interesting moment there. But of course, in the meantime, you'll have Fancy Farm, Scott, and we'll have to talk next week, obviously, as a preview of that. But before we move on from the campaign here, are you hearing anything about what to expect at Fancy Farm this year? What are you looking forward to? And for those folks who are listening from outside the state, this is the true kickoff of the fall campaign.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year. I think every candidate for office on the ballot is participating. It's been a while since we've had that condition. Democrats have tried to destroy this event, including Andy Beshear, by not showing up. So glad to see they're back in participating, and really looking forward to it. It's better when everybody comes and respects Western Kentucky and respects the church and respects what the church is trying to do down there, and so. It's going to be, by the way, I've already heard from a few national reporters who are coming to town.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. So I think we're going to get a lot of attention on Kentucky first Saturday in August.
Are they seeing this race as a harbinger of the presidential race next year?
Well, I think it's fascinating for a lot of reasons. Fancy Farm is, in a gubernatorial year, is really fascinating. And But yeah, I think, and of course, Beshear and Cameron are both young and are interesting for different reasons, and so, yeah, I think the national attention is gonna start to pick up on this thing pretty soon.
Mutton or pork?
That's the big question.
I always get the mutton because it's not around that much, and so when you can get your hands on it.
I used to, but then I just decided I just don't like it enough to get it anymore.
Oh, mutton's the best.
It's the best.
Is it? Well, you're from Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
where does Western Kentucky start, by the way?
Oh,
I mean, how much time do you have?
Most controversial question you've asked.
It's true.
Wait, let's play a game. Do you consider Elizabethtown to be Western Kentucky?
No.
Okay. Do you consider Litchfield to be Western Kentucky?
It's right on the.
No.
It's the gateway to the West.
I don't think I really.
They need an arch there.
Yeah. At McDonald's.
I mean, I could go either way on it.
Do you, but you think anything west of Litchfield, like Beaver Dam, Greenville, Central
Yes.
City, Dawson, you think that is Western Kentucky?
Yes.
Do you consider Bowling Green to be in Western Kentucky?
No.
Really?
Well, why not?
Do you
Because it's too
consider
far
Western
south?
Kentucky? Do you consider Western Kentucky University to be in Western Kentucky?
Well, also there's the other thing.
At one
about-
point it was.
Yeah.
Eastern Kentucky
There also
University?
is the whole difference between West Kentucky and Western
Right.
Kentucky.
That is a big distinction.
Let me ask you this. If you had to describe where Bowling Green is in the state, how would you describe that portion of the state?
I mean, do you agree with me that it doesn't have a West or Western Kentucky vibe to it? Like,
I agree with you, yes. But
I've heard.
I understand that they have the name.
I want to hear
Yeah.
Scott. Go ahead, Scott. But what?
I agree with you. But this came up the other day because there is an ad on TV right now where this dude is describing Southern Kentucky. And I've never heard, it's a Beshear ad, and it's some dude claiming to be a Republican, and he's like, Southern Kentucky. And I've never heard anyone refer. I've heard Western Kentucky. I've heard South Central.
South Central.
That's what I would say.
That's right. Yeah.
I've heard Southeastern. I've heard Eastern. I've heard Central. I've heard Bluegrass. I've heard Metro Louisville. Northern. I've never heard anyone call it Southern Kentucky. Do you know anybody that calls any part of the state Southern Kentucky?
I've met a couple people who have said that, but I always just
and what state were they from?
That's right. Because really, basically, I mean, Southeastern certainly you can identify.
Yeah, but I would always like in my own language, I would use South Central to describe Bowling Green.
Right. I think that's right.
All right.
Even though it's the home of Western Kentucky University.
Yeah, it should be South Central University.
Well, you might. This is a whole other can of worms we're going to open up.
But there is a distinction between Western and then West.
Right.
That is true.
Like the Purchase area, very different. Very different from quote-unquote Western Kentucky.
I will say it's important, and to your point earlier, Scott, to kind of put a bow on it here, it's an area of the state that rarely gets adequate attention, especially the farther east you go and the more into the state capital. And Fancy Farm is an opportunity where it's on the map. And it is an and let's make sure that with that tradition and those great folks in that area are respected and honored, and let's make sure that a lot of money is raised for St. Jerome Catholic Church, all the great work they do in that area.
It's a pivotal battleground in this campaign. Beshear's ancestrally come from West Kentucky. Daniel Cameron picked a running mate, Robbie Mills, from Western Kentucky. If they win, he'll be the only constitutional officer who lives west of I-65. And I do think there's a feeling in Western Kentucky that they're often overlooked by state government.
Right. And
so Cameron obviously gave a nod to that. So I expect both campaigns to be spending a lot of time down there. But pivotal battleground, rural area, Republicans got to run up the score down there.
Scott, I want to ask you before we wrap it up here this evening about something else that really got a lot of attention this week, and you actually were repeated, quoted. I saw highlights of your appearances on CNN on all kinds of different social media feeds and such, and this has to do with the Florida history curriculum. And the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, and her statements about this. Remind me where this stands and what's the latest on this?
Well, last week the Florida Department of Education unveiled its curriculum standards on a number of fronts, and including on teaching African American history. And Kamala Harris fabricated out of whole cloth, manufactured of whole cloth, a controversy about it. You've probably seen something about it, claiming that Ron DeSantis wanted to teach kids that slavery was good, was a good thing, help people. Completely made up. I mean, this whole thing was totally made up. Not to mention that the standards were written by African American PhDs. That the scholars who wrote it are saying Kamala Harris is lying about what we did here. And 7 months ago, do you guys remember the controversy in Florida over the AP African American Studies course?
Sure.
Turns out that the AP course that Kamala Harris and all Democrats in the world thought was the gold standard African American Studies course contained the exact same language that they're now complaining about in this course. This entire manufactured outrage, and you have all the Democrat talking heads go on TV and repeat all these lies, and the media. This is just like Don't Say Gay. It's just like the book bans. It's just like COVID. Whatever. Love Ron DeSantis, don't like him, want him to win, don't want. I'm just telling you, I don't think a true story has ever been told about Ron DeSantis.
So, Scott, you were on a number of different of programs on CNN. I think is this from State of the Union? Is it from Sunday morning, or what do you have here?
Yeah, this is State of the Union.
I was listen back to
This is the one that went viral.
Okay. Yeah, here we go. Here's Scott and friends.
It's amazing to me that how little Kamala Harris apparently has to do, that she can read something on Twitter one day and be on an airplane the next to make something literally out of nothing. This is a completely made-up deal. I looked at the standards. I even looked at an analysis of the standards in every instance where the word slavery or slave was used. I even read the statement of the African-American scholars that wrote the standards, not Ron DeSantis, but the scholars. Everybody involved in this says this is completely a fabricated issue. And yet, look how quickly Kamala Harris jumped on it. So the fact that this is her best moment, a fabricated matter, is pretty ridiculous in my opinion.
I love the music. That was a nice touch.
One of my sparring partners had said that they thought this was Kamala's best moment as vice president. I'm like, so she sees something from the left wing fever swamps on Twitter one day. She hops down to make a speech the next. And her best moment is on something that they literally just had to make up. Pretty stupid. I mean, honestly, this was insane. So many of these things that have happened to DeSantis, beginning with COVID, all through, it's just one insane made up thing after another. Then Joe Biden did something at the White House this week. He designated the Emmett Till sites, 3 sites about Emmett Till, as national monuments, which I wholeheartedly agree with, by the way. The Emmett Till story needs to be told and memorialized. People need to know about it. National monuments are an underused presidential power, in my perspective. So I agreed with that. Then he gives a speech, and he sort of like, at a time when our history is being erased and people are banning books, we have to. So he like tries to throw shade at Ron DeSantis, which in my opinion cheapened. He's falsely demagogues on this thing, which I think cheapened the Emmett Till designation, which is right and just. But then he cheapens it with this false, stupid attack. There's nobody banning books about Emmett Till. I think he was referencing the pornographic material that they don't want to have put in the hands of kindergartners. No one's banning any books. No one's banning any books. Sexually explicit material is being taken out of the hands of elementary school children.
Which, by the way, is pretty much a practice that's it's time immemorial that we keep harmful materials or age inappropriate materials out of the hands of children, right?
But this whole thing was just completely made up,
right,
on Twitter by the left, amplified by Harris, and everybody just swallowed it. And I just felt like I needed to stand up for the truth here, and I did that, and people went crazy about it. But I think it got a lot of attention. But to me, what sealed the deal was finding out that the exact same language that was in this was in the AP studies that they were all touting 7 months ago. Just goes to show you they read nothing, they believe in nothing. They have no shame. They feel no compunction whatsoever. They just are partisan hacks. That's it. That's all they are. Partisan hacks.
The number of times they've gotten away with this is outrageous. And I don't think there's an analog anywhere in recent memory. I mean, do you remember the whipping at the southern border?
Yes.
Or Jim Crow voting laws in Georgia or anywhere else? All of these are...
Connor.
Exactly. All of these are just
people
made up.
in Georgia are going to die of thirst if these laws pass. No one will be allowed to vote in Georgia. There will be no voting.
There'll be a drought.
and what was the average wait time to vote? 3 minutes. This is all just made up either on Twitter or between Joe Biden's ears. And then they just rush to a camera to talk about it, trying to own the cons.
It's
incredible. It blows up in their face time and time again.
It's incredible how fast some idiot on Twitter can say something and they all just, it gets written into their gospels.
Yep.
It must be true. Do you guys remember back in the 2020 election when they all became convinced that Donald Trump had ordered all the blue mailboxes to be destroyed?
Yes.
So that no Democrats.
Rex Chapman.
Yes. Literally, they all took it as gospel that Trump had ordered all the blue mailboxes to be taken up and destroyed so that Democrats who were too afraid to leave their homes couldn't vote. And no amount of debunking, by the way, it was Obama who ordered any blue mailboxes that got taken away. Obama ordered it. A. B. There was multiple ways to mail in your ballot, but it became religion on Trump and the mailbox. These things become part of their gospels so fast. And then once they're in, you cannot get it out. No amount of, what about this? Have you seen this fact? Have you seen that? No amount of show me the evidence will ever get it out of the gospels, according to Kamala Harris.
One of the things I thought was the most offensive part of this, one of the black scholars who helped write these standards went on Megyn Kelly's show and was talking about the Florida Teachers Union that had like immediately come out and of course was, spouting the Democrat talking points of this. And he was on Megyn Kelly's show and said, we invited them to be a part of like writing these and reviewing them and figuring out what needed to be a part of these standards. And they never showed up. And then as soon as they're out, they're like, oh my God, how could these standards be written like this? I mean, it just, like the fake, it's sort of like the virtue signaling, but I mean, just like the dishonesty in terms of how all of this happened is just mind numbing. And then of course, everything comes back to, well, now it's controversial because they lied. It's now controversial.
It is noteworthy to me that this almost always gets applied to Ron DeSantis. Like everything they don't, they manufacture all this stuff and it's almost always about DeSantis, which gives you a little window into who they really fear, I think, in some ways. And I don't look, DeSantis' campaign is struggling, right? I don't know what's going to happen to him, but the fact that it always comes back to him, pretty telling in my opinion.
Kevin, you mentioned the canard of people going without water and the lines for Georgia voting and the terrible conditions that were there for people voting. It reminded me, Scott, of the terrible conditions for the Texas Congressman Greg Kasar this past week, who went on a 9-hour hunger and thirst strike. 9 hours.
What a hero!
So basically,
9 hours.
So basically, he didn't eat between meals. But
he ate an early lunch and a late dinner,
he
Joe.
I mean,
protesting. It was a real sacrifice.
This is
my favorite part of this was he staged all these photos on the Capitol steps, and he had like a nurse like taking his pulse and checking the oxygen in his blood on his little finger, and there was like someone handing him his first cup of water, and he's like got his shirt unbuttoned, and they're taking these photos of him. Literally, he didn't even skip a meal.
9 hours.
What was he even protesting? By the way,
I think it was working conditions in the heat.
It's hot. It is the summer. Yeah,
it
is the summer. Lord have mercy.
I still bet he raised $1 million over that 9 hours or something.
Outrageous. Just it takes a special kind of shamelessness to be a liberal politician these days. I mean, you have to be willing to stare into a camera like Andy Beshear, or make a speech like Kamala Harris, or sit on the Capitol steps like this loon, and make an absolute fool of yourself in the eyes of most people to please your core base. I tell you, the lack of respect they have for themselves. It's just, I guess I should stop being astonished, but it's astonishing every time we see something.
Scott, before we wrap up, go ahead, Jerry.
That image of him on the steps where he's like, they have like a cold towel on his neck and stuff like that, only rivals the image of AOC when she went to the border and was like pretending to weep in her all white clothing. And they had real pictures, and it was like a lot full of SUVs. They like wasn't actually looking at kids in cages. Those two pictures to me are like the greatest.
Oh no, I'll do you one better. When AOC was arrested in front of the Supreme Court and really just gingerly walked away, but she held her arms behind her as if she was in handcuffs.
Yes.
She put her arms behind her back and wanted the photos from the angle. That was a pretty good one.
People.
That was a pretty good one. It's pretty crazy, man.
That is a typical ice skating maneuver, though. You put your hands behind your back like that. I think she was just practicing. Yeah, for the ice follies.
Smooth. She was stretching. Stretching.
Scott, before we wrap it up, I do want to ask you, friend of the pod, friend of all of us, the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell this past week certainly made news for unfortunate reasons when he paused for a lengthy amount of time and appeared to be maybe I don't know what the situation is. I'm going to ask you about this, but obviously a lot of different conjecture out there from the press and such when there was concerns for his health at the podium there at the Ohio Clock, the media gaggle that happens there every week. You have since spoken to him, and I have not spoken to anybody else who has spoken to him. I know that I saw him later on the floor of the Senate, and he's been engaged in a number of different activities, and it doesn't appear to be worse for the wear. But tell me what he told you.
Yeah, I'm sure you've all seen the video by now. he told me he got a little lightheaded and, stepped away from the podium. I do think the way this is being played on TV is a little dishonest. Everybody's showing the video of the podium, but what they're not showing as much of is he came back a few minutes later, took all the more questions that he normally takes. Then he left the press conference. He then went immediately and met with Kevin McCarthy. Then he had some other meetings in the Capitol. Then he made some phone calls, including with Joe Biden. He talked to me, called me. Then he went to a dinner in Washington at night of all the Major League Baseball owners and made a speech at a dinner. Then he went back to the Capitol, went down to the floor as the Senate was voting on some NDAA amendments, and was down on the floor for a long time with the rest of his colleagues. So he had a momentary sort of like lightheadedness, and then immediately resumed his schedule. Today he met with Commerce Lexington. He met the
Italian Prime Minister.
Yeah. Who, by the way, I'm going to talk about that sometime. And then, by the way, Joe Biden, did you guys see his tweet? So he met with her and he said, I grew up in a neighborhood where I felt a little strange that, my last name didn't end in O. Like he was trying to claim that he grew up now he's already claimed he grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. Now he's claiming he grew up in an Italian neighborhood, but we'll talk about that.
He also said, I'm Irish, but I won an Italian Man of the Year award or something. He had a lot of things he was trying to trade on.
But anyway, McConnell met with her, and then they finished up. I think they finished up the NDAA tonight. Mm-hmm. And so this man has kept an amazingly vigorous schedule. How
did he sound? How did his voice sound? Yeah.
Sounded great. He sounded like Mitch McConnell. I mean, I've known the man since I was 16 years old. I mean, he sounded like Mitch, and we had a good chat, and he was kind of prattling off about all the things he had to get done, which he then did. Kevin McCarthy commented on their meetings and said he had, seemed like normal Mitch McConnell. All of his colleagues in the Wall Street Journal today are saying, yeah, he's our leader, no problem. So I think he's fine, honestly, and he sounded fine to me. And now that the Senate is done, looking forward to seeing him next week. I know he's confirmed to go to Fancy Farm, and so I look forward to seeing what he has to say down there on the big stage.
Gentlemen, any seen, read, heard this week? Anything to share with us that you've seen, Kevin?
Oh, yeah. I got a good scene. I went to go see the new Oppenheimer movie.
Oh, yeah.
Last Friday
Don't tell me how it ends.
We'll talk about that later.
Not with a whimper.
3 hours long. I went to go see it at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, which was not my best decision. It was a long movie, but it was so good to watch, to see the story. Big recommend. Didn't go see Barbie.
I saw Oppenheimer on the IMAX, and it was amazing. It is 3 hours. It's a long time to sit in a seat, but I mean, obviously we've done it on the podcast tonight, but it's great. I mean, it's going to be one of Nolan's masterpieces. And yeah, I didn't know a ton about Oppenheimer. I've heard of him, of course, but I hadn't read the book. And so now I'm sort of motivated to read American Prometheus, about all the political intrigue that went on with Strauss and everybody. Anyway, good call out.
Jared?
I started watching The Blacklist on Netflix.
I've never seen that before.
Which
it's like a step back in time.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just added or it's just been trending lately, but it was on the front page of Netflix, and I like James Spader. I actually liked him as Robert California in The Office, which I know is
you were the only one, I think.
Yeah, I might have been one of like 5 people who can say
what that. He was terrific. He was amazing.
I think he's brilliant in that. And just some other things. I like him, and so I'm maybe 4 or 5 episodes in, and I like it. I sort of like been looking for something to like kind of play all the time. It has a lot of seasons and maybe you can skip an episode or 2. So I've enjoyed the first 5 or 6 episodes so far.
It wouldn't be Flyover Country if I don't say something to embarrass myself, but you reminded me, Kevin, about, seeing this movie. And did you nod off at all during this at all? Did you fall asleep?
No.
Okay. Well, I have before, not during that movie. Back in a previous life when I used to review movies as part of one of my radio gigs.
Oh, yeah.
And, so it was.
Was that the last time you saw a movie too?
Stop it. Anyway, and I made it my goals for several years to see every Academy Award nominated movie before the Oscars to be able to comment on that and predict. But when you're seeing like 3 movies in one day, after a while it can kind of wear on you. And at one point, I did wake up.
Gosh. Having to sit and watch 3 movies in one day can really wear on you.
I'm just saying. Anyway. At one point, I came very close to being locked into Showcase Cinemas overnight in Louisville because I fell asleep. It was not good.
If you watch 3 movies back to back to back, you were on like a bit of a hunger and thirst strike.
I was.
You come out and,
they actually had the little oximeter on my finger there. They're keeping track of that. Is he okay? Get him some jujubes. He's all right. All right. All right. First, that's got anything else going? Any predictions? Yes. Oh yeah.
No prediction. I want to do my Seen Read Heard.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay. Yes.
Every week you try to cut me off from this.
I do.
Also, I didn't get to do mine. I didn't get to do mine either.
You said no. You shook your head. You changed your mind.
Let me do mine.
All right, Scott, go ahead.
I am looking at a letter on congressional.
Is it X?
No, I'm looking at a letter on congressional letterhead signed by Congressman Morgan McGarvey of Louisville, Aaron Houchin of TBD State. We'll have to look that up.
Southern Indiana. She's right across the river from Louisville.
Okay, and Thomas Massey, my congressman,
Also
and they are writing to the Honorable Rena Bitter, complaining about and asking for a passport office to be put in Louisville, Kentucky. Morgan McGarvey says in his tweet, a Democrat, by the way, Kentuckians shouldn't have to travel all the way to Atlanta or Chicago to get their passports renewed. Louisville is a major travel hub in a highly populated region. We need a passport agency. I'm leading a bipartisan effort to make that happen. I just wanted to say, I read your letter, Morgan McGarvey. I read your tweet. Thank you to the congressmen who have joined Morgan on this. The passports are a mess. We need services here in Flyover Country needs its passports. It's a total mess. If only there was someone who were in charge of the branch of government that manages passports to clean this up. But thank you, Morgan and Brett and Thomas, for getting on the passports for Flyover Country. Anyway, I wanted to call that out. Bipartisan effort, long overdue.
And I will echo that by saying that the State Department has no accountability on this. There are faceless bureaucrats behind the scenes who have completely bumbled the entire passport application and processing process, and there is no accountability for it whatsoever. Sean, go ahead.
So they released the, I guess, the final bit of the Jack Ryan series on Amazon.
Have not seen that yet.
Recently.
Mm-hmm.
So I started watching that. That's my scene.
Oh, can I do it?
Does Jim get with Pam at the end?
Can I do another one?
No.
It's Flyover Country with Sean Southern. Go ahead.
I also have been watching something because I've been on an airplane a lot the last few weeks, and I don't have Paramount Plus, but they have some of their shows on the flights. And I've been watching a little mini series called The Offer, which is a show about the making of The Godfather.
Oh.
And it's the recollections of he's in it. It's the recollections of Al Ruddy, who was the producer of the film, and how all the crazy things that happened with him trying to get this movie made, and how he met with Joe Colombo. And anyway, it's delightful if you're sort of interested in the inner workings of the movie business. But there's just some hilarious sort of overacted characters from the Hollywood era. And anyway, I find it fascinating. I don't have Paramount. I have to get on airplanes in order to watch it. I'm going to try to watch another episode on the way home tomorrow. But anyway, since everybody else is watching stuff, I'll throw mine in. The Offer on Paramount.
Kevin and Jared, do you have a double up Seen Read Heard before we go?
No, it's over. That's
okay,
it.
It's it. All right, Scott. Well, look for you on the networks. Thanks for listening. For Sean, Jared, Kevin, and Scott, I'm Joe. Have a good night and a week.
Flyover Country with Scott Jennings is a production of Bluegrass Media Lab, coming to you from the heart of Middle America, Louisville, Kentucky. If you like what you heard, subscribe to Flyover Country on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast.